May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O Christ, our Savior. Please be seated. One flesh, Jesus says. Let us be one flesh in marriage, one heart, two hands, companions to each other. The world, when it reflects God's presence, is like a child's playground, unfettered by demand or prejudice. Let us create God's reign together in our marriages and in our commitments to each other. God invites us to taste the child in our companions, the child in each other, and feel the softness of the universe when we inhabit it together. This is how I've parsed today's gospel reading on marriage and divorce. You may have gotten just through Genesis and decided, I don't want to listen to this, because it only gets worse from there. So how do we wrestle with this? It's no pretending that it's not hard to hear Jesus say, what God has joined together, let no man separate. Especially if, like me, you have been divorced, or you have seen friends suffer in difficult, hard, destructive marriages. I think that in the end, however, Jesus is pointing to marriage and the wondrous possibilities of a long-term commitment. So hidden in this talk of divorce is something deeper, and that is the gift that we give each other in commitment in marriage. He is showing us not in long-term commitment. Jesus points us back in time to the very first couple. In the book of Genesis, the first human being was alone. In the earlier days of the universe, God crafted a human creature from mud of the earth. And yet this creature of mud was made in God's image. And the creature was alone in the wilds of the forests and streams of the Garden of Eden. Time passed, and it came to happen that the human desired to plant and grow food and cultivate the world around him, to cultivate the Garden of Eden. And yet this human being was alone, without a companion, and this human being was lonely. It had no one. It could look into the beauty of the plants around it. It could look toward purple mountains in their majesty. With its ears, it could hear the stirring call of eagles, or be lulled by the rushing burble of streams. But it could not share this. In fact, it could not even see itself. It was unlike God in that way, for God saw God's image in the creature that it created. And yet this creature had no one to look at. It could only be like Narcissus in the Greek legend that found its image in watery reflection. And here this creature is alone. So God took the lonely human in the Garden of Eden, and God divided the creature into two beings. The earth creature, which had been without gender, became male and female. It was itself, but now differentiated to some extent in appearance and proclivities, though both were made in the image of God. And now, with a companion for the tasks of life, the male creature exclaimed, "Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Now she will be woman and I will be man, because we are one flesh." One flesh that was divided and became two. Two different, but two that could look at each other in the face and see something of their humanity reflected there. So Jesus quotes this passage, which we know as the 3rd chapter of Genesis, to the Pharisees, who've come to ask him about divorce. But I believe that Jesus is more interested in commitment and companionship than in separation and loneliness. At that time, in 1st century Palestine, many Jews were arguing about the Jewish law and when divorce might be proper. Just as in the U.S. some 50, 60 years ago, divorce was a titillating and debated topic. Controversy surrounded what circumstances might justify a man obtaining a get or decree of divorce. And there were two camps. Followers of a rabbi called Hillel, who came a little bit before Jesus, but was roughly Jesus' contemporary, believed a man might divorce a woman for any small way in which she displeased him. Anything. And people in the other camp, followers of another rabbi of the same era, called Shammai, argued that divorce was only proper in cases in which a woman had had sex with someone else other than her husband or the man to whom she was betrothed. And this argument turned on a section of Deuteronomy, which is the law, is a compilation of all the laws that Moses gave at Mount Sinai, all brought together in Deuteronomy. And this section says a woman may be divorced for indecency or for being objectionable in some way. So this is the question that they're sort of testing Jesus with. What side is he going to come on? Hillel or the other rabbi? So which is it the Pharisees asked Jesus? Might a wife be divorced for burning her husband's toast? Or must she have been witnessed to have had an affair? And of course that would be rather difficult, wouldn't it? I mean, most people don't have affairs in public. Which constituted impurity? In religious terms, in all of Jewish society was organized around practices and concepts of faith. That was how they lived. They had laws of faith, laws of religion. So which action, burning the toast or having an affair, would break a woman off from God's grace? It's kind of a ridiculous question, isn't it? So Jesus will have nothing to do with it. Because it is serious stuff, this question. And we have to remember that not only is this a question that seems to be ridiculous, this was also a time in which it really mattered. Remember what happened to John the Baptist. He had spoken against Herod, and Herod was divorced, and he had spoken against Herodias, Herod's second wife, who was also divorced. And we know what happened to John the Baptist. So Jesus is in that political situation, but he's also faced with this sort of quibbling, this what is divorce? What constitutes divorce? And so he gives them kind of a roundabout answer. And he does this by first asking them what Moses wrote on the topic. And the Pharisees quote back to him Moses' law from Deuteronomy, which we have just seen appears to allow divorce, though in what terms it's not clear. But no, it's not that law, Jesus appears to say. Look even further back. Look all the way back to Genesis, because it was believed that Moses also wrote the book of Genesis. So look back to what Moses said about the very beginning. Look back to the beginning when God first created humankind and consider those first humans, each fit for the other, companions in work and life. The second law, this law, of Moses that came along in Deuteronomy, was sort of a stopgap measure. That is what Jesus tells the Pharisees. Moses gave it at Sinai because of our hardness of heart. It worked well enough, but it is not all that God intends for us. God invites us to soften our hearts, to let go that hardness of heart, and to be like a child. Be like a child running in the grass, a child unfettered by classroom rules or responsibility. To be hard of heart means to be cut off from God. When we are hard of heart, we are in danger of losing our souls. We put our softer selves, those childlike selves, we put them aside in anger, or we put them aside in the pursuit of power, recognition, or desire. When Pharaoh refused to let the Jews leave Egypt, his heart was hardened. We can often harden our own hearts in much smaller ways, when we are petty or controlling or react to those who seem that way to us. When our parents seem to want to control us, we harden our hearts. Or when our children nag us into submission, there is a certain hardening of heart. I'm guilty of this myself. I'll give you one example. Sometimes my husband, Tom, leaves his sweatshirt or sweater in a heap in the living room. If my heart is soft, I pick it up, I fold it, smooth it, and put it next to the stairs going up to the bedroom to be put away. But if my heart is hard, well, I look at that sweatshirt on the floor and I think, what a mess. I think the sweatshirt is a mess, and then I begin to think my husband is a mess, and why is that sweatshirt on the floor? And I want to just step on it. But I don't. I pick it up, and I fold it, and I put it next to the stairs going up to the bedroom. So sometimes my heart is soft, sometimes it is hard, but I pretend that it's soft. And that works, that carries me through, but it is a discipline to soften my heart. And I will not pretend that all marriages, that all companionships are like this. Sometimes it is the marriage itself that shuts us down and closes off our hearts. Physical or mental abuse, drug or alcohol addiction, are landmines that can destroy the soul. The spirit closes itself down in suffering and in its own struggle for survival, and then the marriage may die. Nonetheless, God offers us something deep and precious. In marriage and in deep committed relationships, God offers us the ability to see, appreciate, and respond to the softness of the unhardened child in each other. God invites us to soften our hearts to find and sustain love and companionship, to see the softness in our partner, to see the child in our partner, to look into our partner's face and see what that companionship might be, Today's reading from Mark concludes with a familiar passage about Jesus welcoming the little children. I think this is part of the answer. Let them come to me, for to such ones the reign of God's blessing belongs. The reign of God belongs. And then he embraced them. He embraced the children, blessing them, laying his hands upon them. And it is also as if he is embracing the childlike qualities within us, the softness that is within us. Many days of a marriage exist in a monotony of sameness. We do the wash, we pay the bills, we give the children their baths, we walk the dogs, and then perhaps at the end of the day we share some highlight of our day. But every so often, in talking about the day and clinking our glasses at dinner and reading aloud a passage from a book at nighttime, there is a little trembling in the air around us, and we and our companion are connected as one. We are reminded that we are one flesh. Sometimes I pick up a sweatshirt to fold, and I catch from it the scent of my husband. At those moments, it is not the messiness of the house or unpaid bill that I remember. I remember lying against a pillow, listening to Tom read to me a passage from his book, and my heart is soft. It is those moments of intensity, bounded by the everydayness of our lives, that make and sustain a marriage, I believe. So one final little story. In Woods Hole, on Cape Cod, where my family sometimes gathers in the summer, away from the busyness of the city, I once saw a small little sign tacked onto a little white porch. And the words were lettered in bright colors in a child's handwriting, and they said, "Be kind whenever possible." And the second line said, "It is always possible." I think this captures the essence of what I'm talking about. And I urge you to attend to your hearts that they may be soft with each other. Amen.